Hello guys, can you hear me now? I think today will not be able to handle this, so I'll be taking CSS for today. All right, if you can hear me, please signify so we can start now. Thank you. Just signify you can hear me. And can I even share my screen here, sir? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so I will share my screen now. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Oops. Okay, all right. So since you can all see my screen now, let's start the session. Okay. All right. So you're all welcome once again. We're very sorry for the delay and the issues. So let's move on. I think we all know the rules already. So basically, I'll just display all these things for us. We don't need to go over them again. The bootcamp rules, please be respectful. Use of foul language is not acceptable. Advertising of any kind is not allowed. And please post only event-related content on the Slack channel. Discrimination of any kind, gender, religion, ethnicity is not allowed. All right. So the guidelines for our office hour session: mute your microphone. The questions icon contains all questions you want to ask, and if you want to ask questions, ensure all questions are typed there. All right, the chat icons contains the attendees charts. Okay, I hope you can all see the images here. All right, so when asking for help on Slack, whenever you have an issue you need help with, please try and be very explanatory so the person who wants to help you will know what he or she is going to offer you. All right, tell us what you are trying to achieve, what you have done. If possible, provide screenshots of your workflow and then the error messages you got. Screenshots too is preferred. Right, this will not only make it easier for one to understand your position, but also help you save time. Please do not use your phone to get screenshots. Use the print screen key on your keyboard. Okay. So the week contents. So at FFX, we believe in the power of learning, given the rapidly changing nature of our world and dizzying speed of advances in technology. We believe that the most important skill we can teach you is the ability to learn. We believe that learning who, learning where and when, and also how to ask the right questions is more important than knowing the right answer, because in today's digital world, the answer is always changing. So our mission is to help people learn how to learn, unlearn and relearn the skills they require to have a successful career in an era of digital transformation. Okay, so this week content, our software overview, will be using the Visual Studio Code as a code editor. And the useful VS Code extensions you can install includes the live server, then 100 days of code, our web browsers, Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. Anyone that suits you works well. All right, so straight to the business of the day. So this week content is, the topic for this week is CSS. So we'll be going through the introduction to CSS, CSS Margin and Padding, CSS Units, CSS Fonts, and CSS itself. So after then, we'll take your questions, then we'll provide answers to them. So over to introduction to CSS now. Please, if you can still hear me, if you can hear me, please signify so I will know I'm not talking to myself, please. If you can still hear me, signify before I continue, please. Okay, it's breaking. All right, Favor. Sorry about that. I think the network is not really on our side today. All right, thank you, Toyosi. So I will continue. Please, if you can grab, try to grab as much as you can. We are recording the session, so you can always go back to it whenever you have time. Okay, so we'll continue now with the introduction to CSS. So basically, CSS is an acronym for Cascading Style Sheets. All right, it is a simple design language intended to simplify the process of making web pages presentable. CSS allows you to apply styles to web pages. So most importantly, it enables you to do this independent of the HTML that makes up each of your web page. CSS is actually easy to learn and understood, but it provides powerful control over the presentation of an HTML document. So you might be wondering, why do I need to learn CSS? Right? CSS saves time. You can write CSS once and reuse same sheet in multiple HTML pages. For instance, in the last assignments you did, I think if you on your navbar, I saw most of you putting home, about, and then contact us. So you can have a file that that will help you style your home page, your about page, and your contact us page. All right. CSS saves time. It is also easy to maintain. All right. Easy maintenance is part of the reason why you should use CSS. So to make a global change, all you need to do is to change the style. Right? All you need to do is to modify your style.css, and all the elements in all the web pages will be updated automatically. Another good reason is search engines. CSS is considered as clean coding technique, which means search engines won't have struggled to read its content. Another good reason is its superior styles to HTML. It has a much wider array of attributes than HTML, so you can give a far better look to your HTML page in a comparison to HTML attributes. And then the last but not the least is offline browsing. You can store web applications locally with the help of offline page. Alright, using this, you can view offline websites. So I'll open my VS Code now to show you the syntax of CSS. Before I continue, please, I want to confirm if I'm not talking to myself, please. This is very important as network is really showing itself today. Please, if you can hear me, signify so I can continue. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Favor. Simon says for you. You said it's breaking. Please bear with us I think you just need to keep following us, okay? And don't worry, we'll provide you the recorded version of the session so you can have full access to it later on. All right. Thanks, guys. I will continue now with the syntax of CSS. So onto my VS Code. Okay, so let me just create a file. I'll call it style.css. All right. So the extension for CSS file is .css. All right. We all know that for HTML, anytime we want to save our HTML file, we do the file name dot extension, and the extension for HTML is .html. So for CSS, we do .css. Okay, so the syntax of CSS is comprises of style rules that are interpreted by the browser and then applied to the corresponding elements in your document. So a style rule consists of a selector and a declaration box block rather. So basically so let me just write this here so you can see. So selector, I'll write selector. So for instance, let's say our selector is h1, then the declaration will be declaration. So let's say I want to give it a color of blue, and then I want to specify the font size for it. So that will be 12. Let me give it 12 pixels, right? So basically, this is the syntax of CSS. Consists of a selector and a declaration box. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So the selector points to the HTML you want to style. The declaration block contains one or more declarations separated by semicolons. So each declaration includes a CSS property name and a value separated by a colon. So for instance, we said we want to specify a property, a color property whose value is blue. Then font size as well with 12 pixels as its value. Okay, one thing you should know is a CSS declaration always ends with a semicolon, and declaration blocks are surrounded by curly braces, as you can see here. So now let me write a proper CSS style. So let's say we have okay, I think let me create an index.html file so we can use that to be previewing our styles. So briefly, I'll bring in my HTML, what's it called now? Body blocks. All right, so let's say I want to give the body. I want to style the body of our web page. Let's say I want to give it a background color of let's use black, right? So the body here is the selector. Now the declaration is this block I'm highlighting. All right, so the declaration has a property of background color whose value is black. So this is a proper one of the proper ways of writing CSS anyways. So let me display something here. Let's say h1 welcome to CSS. Okay, can I open this in browser? Open no. Okay, I think let me just open it in my folder so I can open this. Okay, so nothing is actually happening. We are still having a white background as our as our background color. So that is because the CSS file and the HTML file does not have, there's no linkage between them, so they are not seeing each other. All right. So to do that, we can simply bring in our CSS file by saying link rel equals to style sheet. So specify the type as text/CSS and say the href equals to style.css. All right. So now let's go again on preview. So there it is. We have the body. Everything now is black. You can see our text. Also, the text color is black, so nothing is actually showing. All right. So that is one way of. This is one way of linking your CSS and HTML file. So we have I think 3 ways of writing your CSS style. We have the inline CSS, we have the internal, and we have the external. All right. So what we have done now is the external. So let me show you how to write the internal. So I will comment this out. So right here in the head block, specifying the style. So you start by opening a style tag and a closing style tag. Okay, so I'll copy this body style and put it into it. Okay. So let's preview again. So what? Okay, so let me change the color of this text. So I'll give it white. Let me give it white. Okay. All right. All right. So there it is. So that's the second way. So the third way of linking CSS. This is inline. I'm sorry. This is internal. The first one was external. So the inline now. So let's say I don't want to put my style here. I only want to style. I just want to give a particular element on my website some styles. So all I need to do is just specify the style tag on it. So I'll say style equals to background color. I'll give it black. Let me comment this out as well. So I'll give this. Let's make it green. Yeah. Okay, that works. So the default text color is black anyway, so you might be wondering, but we didn't specify color for the text, so why does it have it color black? So the default color for your text is always black, so you can specify color for your heading tag here too by saying style equals to color. Then we'll say, let's specify the color name. Let's give it white and yeah, so that is that on that. So basically we've touched 2 things now. We've introduced us to CSS. We've mentioned how to we've talked about how to link your CSS file and your HTML file. We said we have 3 ways of doing that. One, the internal style, the internal method. We have the external method, and we have the inline method. The external method involves creating a style.css file or your file name.css file externally, and then you link it in your head tag. You link it in your head tag within the inside your HTML file anyway. So by doing that, your HTML elements will get their styles from the file, from your CSS file. So we also talked about the the internal style, which involves writing your styles, your CSS style inside your head tag in the same HTML file this time around. So to do that, I opened a style tag. I also closed it here, and then I specify the properties and values of the elements I want to style. So here we style the body of our HTML page. We gave it a background color of black. We gave the text color white. Then we also talked about the third method, which is the inline method. So this involves writing your CSS style inside your HTML elements on the same line with your HTML elements by specifying the style. Is it property now or our attributes? All right, by specifying the style attribute on it, which we have done here. Okay, so briefly now, I'll move on to. Okay, I think let's have more examples. Okay, so I think I'll just stay with this. Let's stay with this external style for now. Okay, so let me remove all of this. Which one? So basically, I'm sorry, briefly, let's style our H1. So let's give it some color. Let's give it white, right? Let's align it to the center, and let's give it a font size of, okay, let's do 30 pixels. Right. Okay, let's move on. So the second thing we need to talk about is margin and padding. All right. So firstly, let's talk about CSS margin. The CSS margin properties are used to create spaces around elements outside of the defined borders. So with CSS, you have full control over the margins of your elements. So there are properties for setting the margin for each side of an element. For instance, we have the top, we have the right, we have the bottom, and the left. Okay, so CSS has properties for specifying the margin for each side of an element, which includes the margin top, we have the margin right, the margin bottom, and the margin left. So let's see some examples on those properties now for margin. Excuse me. Let me create a div element here. Let me give it class div class. Let's call it box. Oh, sorry, let's call it header. Yeah, header. Okay. So we're going to style our header. Let's start by giving it a width of let's say 50%. And the background color, let's give it What color is this? Let's stay with this. Let's see what we have. Okay. Now let's play around with the CSS margin properties we have. So we have the margin top, we have margin right, we have margin bottom, and margin left. So first, let's start with margin top now. So let's say I want to look at this before I apply the property. Look at the position of this guy here. So let's say I want it to float to my right now. So all I need to do is specify the margin right CSS for it and say margin right, how many pixels or what is the value I want. So we can use pixels, we can use percentage as well. So let's say I want to give it, so let's give it something obvious, 20 pixels, okay? Nothing is happening. Is it right or left? Oh, okay, sorry. So it's left. Okay, let's increase this pixels to, let's say 80. Right? So you can see it's actually changing its position. So another thing we can do, we can apply margin top as well. Let's give it 100. This time let's use percentage for this. Okay, you can see it has moved away from where it was. So I'll reduce it back to 10%. Okay. Then another thing, margin we have right now. Okay, so let's try 10 pixels for this. Okay. Now let's try bottom. So I want to create an horizontal line after this so we can see the effect of the margin bottom. Hopefully I hope we should. Okay, there it is. So we have let me cancel this out and see. Okay. So this is the original position of the horizontal line we used. So we want to give this our box. We want to give it a margin bottom of 5%. So you can see the effect of that. So it pushes the elements below it, pushes it down, it gives it space. Okay, so like we have said, we said it is used to create space around the element outside of any defined borders. Outside, please take note of that word outside. Margin is for is used for creating space around elements outside of any defined borders. Okay, so we have some other properties as well. We have sorry, our properties can have other values as well. We have the auto, so the browser calculates the margin itself if you specify auto. So let's say margin. Okay, so we're giving it. Let's give this auto. So by specifying this property, we are saying that the browser should calculate the margin itself. Then another property which we have actually used is length. So specifying the length is the same thing as specifying the margin in pixels, in centimeter, and in pt. Then another one is percentage. Okay, specifies a margin in percentage of the width of the containing elements. Another one is inherit. It specifies that the margin should be inherited from the parent element. All right, all of these can be found in the material we have given you. Okay. So before I move on, please, I want to confirm again if I am live Okay. All right. Simonix, you said network is affecting the output. Well, we are sorry for that. I think it's your network basically. But don't worry, you have access to the recorded version of the session later on. So now let's move on to CSS padding. Okay. So CSS padding properties are used to generate space around an element content. I'll come again. CSS paddings, its properties are used to generate space around an element content inside of any defined borders. Please take note of that as well. So that's a clear, that gives you the clear difference between CSS margin and CSS padding. So margin is used to specify used to create space outside of any defined borders, while paddings are used for creating space inside of any defined borders. Okay. Another clear difference is that CSS properties are used to margin properties are used to create space around elements, while the CSS padding properties are used to generate space around an element content. So like the CSS margin does, CSS padding also have its individual properties such as the padding top, the padding right, the padding bottom, padding left. So they also share the same values with CSS margin. You can specify the length, you can specify this percentage, you can also specify the inherit value of it. Okay, so let's see some examples. Okay, still using our box, we'll go ahead and give our box some padding. Right, so I'll give it padding top. So let's give this 50 pixels view. Okay, I see the clear effects. Another property we should try out, padding right. Let's give that 30 pixels. See the effects. Okay. Another one, padding bottom. Please take note of the difference between these two CSS properties. Okay. So now our box is looking much more better than it was before. Okay. So padding left. Let's give it 80 pixels. I hope that's not too much. Okay, it's not. All right. So this is much more better. So let's say we want to create a nav bar with this now. Actually, this is too big for a nav bar anyway. This is too big for a nav bar. So I'll modify the properties and remove the horizontal line as well. So check this out. Let's see what we have. Guys, please, I think I went off for a while. Please, can you hear me now? Hello? If you can hear me, please signify before I continue. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Fuad. Okay, I think I'll just continue now. Let me go back to my VS Code. So I was trying to show us the effect of padding and margin on our HTML, in our HTML page. So we are trying to create a small nav bar, right? So what's going on here? Okay, users. Okay, so let's give it a little padding to increase. Okay, all right, fair enough. So just to show us what CSS margin and padding can be used for. Okay. Let me move on now to CSS units. We don't have enough time anymore. Please, can you hear me before I continue with CSS unit? If you can hear me, please signify. Favor, you can hear, but it's breaking. All right. Okay, no problem. I will continue now. So on to CSS units now. CSS has several different units for expressing a length. Okay, so many CSS properties take length values. For instance, we have the width, we have the margin, we have the padding, we have the font size. So length is a number followed by a length unit, such as 10 pixels, 2%, and so on and so on like that. So one thing we should know, a white space cannot appear between the number and the unit. However, if the value is 0, the unit cannot be, the unit can be omitted. If the value is 0, the unit can be omitted. For some CSS properties, negative length are allowed. So there are two types of length units anyway. We have the absolute and we have the relative. So some of the absolute lengths include, actually, absolute length units are fixed, and a length expressed in any of these will appear as exactly that size. So the unit now, the length unit includes the centimeter, the millimeter, the inches, the pixels, the points, that is pt, and so on and so forth. Then the relative length, units specify a length relative to another length property. So relative length unit scales better, right, between different rendering mediums. So the unit for relative length includes the EM, all right, the EX, the CH, the REM, the VW, VH, VMIN, Vmax, that is view max, view minimum, view height, view width, and so on and so forth like that. Okay, so if you check the materials we gave you, you find a better example and some nice stuff to work with in it. So quickly, I'll move on to CSS fonts so we can wrap up on time. Okay, so if we are familiar with is it word editing now or graphic, we should know what fonts are. All right, so the same thing we use the fonts for in your graphics designing, in your document editing is the same as what you use it for in CSS, right? So CSS font properties define the font family, the boldness, the size, and the style of a text. Okay, so there are two types of font family names in CSS. We have the generic family and we have the font family. So the generic family is a group of font families with a similar look. For instance, we have the serif and monospace. Then the font family, which is mostly used, specifies a specific font family. For instance, the Times New Roman or Arial. Okay, so the font family of a text is set with the font family property, font-family. Don't worry, I'll show you a very small example of this. Then the font family properties should hold several font names as a fallback system. So if the browser does not support the first font, it will try the next font and so on. Now, you should start the font you want and end the generic family. Okay, so this is to let the browser pick a similar font in the generic family if no other fonts are available. Excuse me. Let's see a very small example of this. Where do we have a text? Okay, we have some text here. Okay, good. Let me look at the preview again. Sorry. Okay, so let's give our H1 tag a font style. So I think I just talked about font family here. I've not mentioned font style, font size, and so on. Okay, so let me quickly do that before I show us, because I'll be using those things here. I think I've used them also. Okay, I've used font size here. Excuse me. Let me. So basically, the font size are used to specify the size of your text, the size you want to give the text you are writing. Remember, I said CSS font properties define the font family, the boldness, the size, and the style of a text. So you can specify the font size like we have done here. We said the font size of our H1 tag should be 31 or should be 30 pixels. All right. So you can also specify the font weight. So we can make it bolder or bold. Anyone? What else? So you can say the font style should be italic. So you can say you want it to be italic, you want it to be, what other properties do we have? Let me see. Again, we have style, a normal, or like you can give it any value you want. All right. So let's make it italic here with this. So these are the three stuffs, the application of fonts. You can specify your font weight, your font style, your font family. Okay, so let's see the effect of that. All right, so basically that is it. Then on to the next one. All right, so now let's talk about CSS as a whole. So I forgot to mention something. In CSS, we have what we call selectors. All right, this is very important, please. I think we need to learn this. So before I continue, let me see again. This network is really something else. Please, can you hear me, guys? I hope I'm not talking to myself. You can hear me, signify, so we can end this quickly. Nobody is signifying, guys. Hello, is TJ here? Okay, TJ is here. Please, can anybody hear me? Fuhad. Okay, Fuhad said yes. Favor, Oluwatoyosi, Leah, Simonix, Abdullahi, please, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. So I want to want to talk about CSS selectors. Okay. So CSS selectors are used to find or select the HTML elements you want to style. I'll come again. They are used to find or select the HTML elements you want to style. So we can divide the CSS selectors into 5 categories. So we have the simple selectors. So these are used to select elements based on the name, the ID, and class. All right. We have the combinator selectors. We have the pseudo class selector and pseudo element selectors. We also have the attribute selectors. So the combinator selectors are used to select elements based on a specific relationship between them. Okay, don't worry, I will show us examples of these things we are talking about. We have the pseudo class selectors, we have the pseudo element selectors. So I will show us an example of the simple selectors and combinator selectors, so we know what we are actually doing. We won't just be using these things, because actually there is more to CSS anyway. So I think by the end of this webinar, we'll have a very good understanding of CSS. So we can do stuff on our own, and with the help of the materials we are giving you, you should be able to do fantastic stuff with CSS. CSS is actually fun to learn anyway. Okay, so back to CSS selector now. So I want to show us a brief example of the simple selectors. Okay, we have used one here. Yes, okay, yes, we have. Look at this H1 tag that contains our welcome to CSS text. As you can see, we referenced it here by just specifying the elements. All right, so this is an example of a simple selector. Okay, we can as well say, so instead of doing this, since we have a div tag housing it, we can say header, please talk to your H1 and give it these styles. So I'll comment this one out now. It will actually work, it will do the same work as specifying it separately out there. So as you can see, no difference. To make us, let's see what it's back to what it was before. So I will comment again. So the second example is this second example is an example of combinator selectors. So I'm using relationship now to specify the element I want to style. Since H1, since the header class and H1 have something in common, the header is housing the H1, the header class is housing the H1. So I'll just specify my header style and say I want the H1. Now, the effect of doing this is that if you have more than one H1 tag here, let's say I want to create another one, call it CSS is fun. actually affect the two of them, to give the two of them the same style. Okay, so this is where the other example of simple selector comes in, the ID selector. Okay, the first one here is name selector. Let me comment. Okay, this is name selector. I'm using the element name to reference to style the whole thing. All right. So the next one now that I want us to know is the ID selector. So after that, we'll talk about the class selector. We have used the class here already. So the ID selector, it uses the ID attributes of an HTML element to select a specific element. Okay, in our case, we have two H1 tags here. Now, we do not want the two of them to have the same style. We want one to be different from the other. So how do we do that? The CSS ID selector helps with that. So with the ID selector, we can specify the specific element we want to style. So the ID of an element is unique within a page. So the ID selector is used to select one unique element. So to select an element with a specific ID, all we need to do is write a hashtag followed by the ID of the element. Okay, so we want to style our, let's give it a name here. Okay, so let's give it ID. What can we call it? Okay, let's call it heading 2. Okay, let's call it ID CSS. Makes sense. Okay, so I'll say ID CSS. Please have the following styles. So I'll give it, oops, where's orange? Okay, let's give it this. Then the font size, let's say I want it to be larger, and then okay, let's leave it like this, just to see the effect. Okay, so you can see that is this is an example of the CSS ID selector. Now please note this, an ID name cannot start with a number. So we cannot say instead of CSS, so I don't want to use CSS, I want to use name. No, this is wrong. You can see it already yourself. My code editor is already helping me flag it as something not really advised. Okay, red. So it's better to use text for it. So the last one, the CSS Class Selector, it selects HTML elements within with a specific class attribute. So to select elements with a specific class, you need to write a period character. That is the dot, and then you specify the class name. All right. So dot example. We have one here already, followed by your curly braces. So we've done one here. So this is an example of the class selector. So my style.css file was able to style this div class because I already specified its class name as header. So the header class is actually present in my CSS file. So if I change this now to header 1, nothing will happen because this class is not being referenced in my HTML file. All right, I hope this is clear enough. So there we go. So let me just give us this last one now. So we'll wrap things up with questions. Please be preparing your questions anyway, because we are going to take it as fast as possible. We'll try to end this by 11:45. Okay, so the CSS Universal Selector now is the last one I want to talk about. There are many examples in the material we're giving you. Please go through them and make use of them very well. So the last one is Universal Selector. So what the Universal Selector does for you is that it selects all the HTML elements on that page. Now, I have a website, I have a blog page. So on a blog page, we all know that there will be so many texts. Blogging involves writing so many words and all of that. So I want to give all my texts a particular style. I don't want to be repeating let's say my body, my footer, all of these things. I don't want to be repeating styles for them. So I just want to apply a single style for all of them. So all I need to do is say, so for instance now I have a paragraph tag on my this work. Okay, hold on. I think it should work. Yes. So I'm using the paragraph tag to write my texts. All right. So let's say I have thousands of these. Let me do this and say learn. Cool. So I have thousands of these. Now I just want all of them to have the same what's it called, the same style. So I don't need to stress myself. With the Universal Selector, I can select all elements on the page and then give it my preferred style. So this is another good thing you should another stuff you should please take note of. This is very useful. Okay, so this is the output of the CSS Universal Selector. So it styles all the paragraph elements on my website. We have others you should know about, and we have the group selector. We have majority of them, but what we have talked about in this webinar are the majority, are the ones you must know about. The ones you must know about. Okay, that's not all on CSS, but for this webinar, we're wrapping it up now with your questions. So please, if you have questions, I'll be taking them now. Questions, please. Bring your questions. Let's have them, and so we can answer them. So we can end this in the next 10 minutes. It's 11:35 already. Fuad, Oluwatoyosi, Favor, and all others. Please bring in your questions. If you don't have questions, we can actually move on. Am I still speaking to people here? Hope I'm not talking to myself. Please, can you all hear me? Hello? Okay, so it's time for questions and answer, please. Let's have your questions so we can answer them. I think TJ is still around. If you can't speak to us. At least I think you should be able to type so you can answer our questions with me. Please drop in your questions. Let's answer them. Or if you don't have questions, okay. Okay, so someone is asking something here. He said, person said the h1 tag and the universal tag on the CSS file, doesn't it achieve the same goal? That's very good of you, very good observation. It actually does. Okay, so meaning that if we have more than one h1 here, like we have, I think we did an example. We duplicated this our h1 before we actually started with an ID selector. So both of them will have the same style. So it actually does the same thing. Okay, so ID selector, to separate them now, you can make use of your ID selector. Thank you. I don't know your name, but thank you so much for that. That's a very good observation. Yes, thank you. Now, somebody saying something said, I was trying to practice what you showed, but I don't know how to go about it. Is there any software I need to download before getting what you showed? Well, Banjoko, if there's any software you need to download, I think it should be your code editor and your browser. So you should download the Visual Studio Code on either of Chrome or Mozilla Firefox browser to get started. I hope that answers the question. Banjoko, please let me know if there's anything you still need to, if there's more clarification I should make. In a nav bar, how do you use the end child? Okay. So I think to do that, you actually need to use this symbol. There is a symbol we haven't mentioned here, but it's inside the material you are going to go through after this webinar. There is a greater than symbol you can make use of to reference them. We didn't specify some example. Okay, let's see something. You can actually reference with the colon symbol. All right. So let's say we have on your navbar now, we have so many what was it called? Now let me make use of the list tags. Yes, the list tags. So to reference the child, you can make use of the column, specify your tag, then the column, and then the end child with the index. Yes. So this selects the first item and so on and so forth like that. You can actually keep doing this. Let's say you have 5 there. So with this you can, this will help you select the end child in your navbar. Fuad, I hope that answers your question. You have 4 minutes to go. If there's any more question, please ask. Okay, so if the tag has a class already, which do you call, the tag or the class to get? Okay, so you can use the I think it's better to use the class to get the end child, because if you use the tag, you might actually be referencing other tags. If you have more than one type of that tag on your page, it will affect the rest of it. So it's better for you to use the class to reference it. Okay. Now, please, how can somebody follow up to practice what has been stated? Yes, thank you, Fuad. How can someone follow up to practice what has been stated? Okay, don't worry. We'll be giving you some assignments. I think during the week or immediately after this session, and then we have access to the material, so you can actually use that to practice, and you can do stuff. If you need questions, don't worry. We'll drop some tasks for you to use so you can practice what you have learned. Okay, so Dreamweaver, can someone use Dreamweaver instead? Well, this is Sadiq Abdul. I think Dreamweaver, let me briefly tell us what Dreamweaver is. Dreamweaver is more or less of a software. Yes, let me call it a software. So it is a web development software. Okay, so instead of writing your code from scratch like we are doing, Dreamweaver can help you. You can use Dreamweaver to, I think, drag and drop your stuffs, but the most efficient one, based on what I'm actually used to, is HTML and CSS, like writing your script. So with Dreamweaver, you don't really write scripts or code. Majority of what you do is drag and drop. So if you want, you can use Dreamweaver, but what will help you with what you are doing inside Dreamweaver is having the good knowledge of how Dreamweaver works. Like the box you are dragging, how does the box, what makes the box look like that? I think it's much more better for you to know how it works. So instead of just going to use Dreamweaver for a starter, it is not really advised. All right. Okay, it seems using Sublime is easier to use than VS Code. How true is that? Well, VS Code and Sublime, they are both, okay, thanks Fuad. All right, they are both good. The reason why we are, in fact, I don't think anyone is easier to use. I don't think anyone is easier to use. They have the same level of, what's it called now? How I put it? But I think VS Code is much more preferred in the developers community, right? The flexibility it gives you is I think it cannot be measured. So you can install your extensions, the UI, the feel. I think, well, you should know what works for you anyway. If using Sublime to code is easy for you, please just stay with it. Know what works for you, all right? Okay, so you said Fuad is saying VS Code is powerful friendly, all right? So your opinion. Okay, so thank you everybody. Yes, thank you Oluwatoyosi. Thank you everybody. Thanks for attending this session. It was it's wonderful having you around. For the first time, I enjoyed interacting with you all. So please, let's stay by the rules. Let's stay by the rules so we can have a very wonderful web development, intro to web development course. At the end of everything, don't worry, you will definitely enjoy signing up for this course. You will know that it's worth signing up for. And please, there is more to learning than just attending a webinar. Practice, in fact, a deliberate practice now. I like to use the word deliberate. Deliberate practice is what you need to adopt. Don't stop learning. remember when I was talking about some stuff in CSS, I said there is more to CSS than what we have just given you here. Please, if you want to go deep, try as much as possible to give yourself a very wonderful task. Design, just think of a UI you can design and look at what you can do with what you can come up with CSS and HTML. All right, so that will be all for today. Thank you very much for coming. And okay, so we have TJ now. All right, TJ wants to speak with us. So TJ, yes, TJ, we can hear. Yes, we can hear you, TJ.
Okay, thank God. Right. Okay, so we are very sorry that network was really not on our side today, and basically the goal of this webinar is to just give an introductory lesson on the content for the week, which is ready. It has been made available ready since yesterday, so you can go and start learning and all like that. And also, in the course of the week, I think even starting from today, between today and Monday, we'll start sending layouts. We'll screenshot layouts to you guys and send, so that anything that you, as you are practicing your CSS, you are applying it. But one of the first assignments we'll be giving is that the HTML assignment that was given to you in the first week, the first 2 pages, your home page and your about me page, you need to start applying CSS to them. And we would like to see your success stories as well, like you did for HTML. Please take a screenshot of what you have been able to achieve by applying that and send to us. Then between today and Monday, we'll look for about 2 to 3 layouts that you can do with the content that we have provided for you, that you'll be able to apply your CSS to. You do the HTML together and also apply CSS to it. So that is that for this week. So, and I would also like to prepare your mind that sometimes you're writing CSS and it's not behaving the way you expect it to behave. You just have to keep at it, and then this time around you have to be more logical. Those some people will say CSS is not a programming language, but the truth is, even with CSS, it requires logic. You need to know what is working and what is not working, and what if you do this, will it work? How will it work, and all like that. So please just continue. Don't just skim through, and there's what we call tutorial hell. You just skim through the tutorial without practicing, without anything. The knowledge will not stick. So please put it to practice, deliberate practice, just like Folorin Shaw had said. So thank you, and I cannot stop apologizing for how network dealt with us today. So please, we are sorry. Next week, we'll try to make sure that there's an alternative, even when our main network is not responding well. So thank you for your time and for your patience and for understanding. We are very grateful. So I'll hand over to Folorin Shaw to end everything. Hello, Folorin Shaw.
Hello, TJ. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Okay, so guys, that is all for this week. We'll see you next week. Thanks for attending. Bye.